Let me begin today by sharing an observation I've gathered over many years of traveling, teaching, and watching people live their lives. And it's this: in every room, in every company, in every city, there are always two groups, the many and the few. Now, that's not meant to be harsh. It's simply the way life seems to sort itself out. The many wish, the few decide. The many talk, the few act. The many wait for the perfect moment, while the few understand that moments become perfect only after you begin. And if you study long enough, you'll discover this isn't an accident. It's a pattern. The many drift through life hoping things will change. The few sit down, take a deep breath, and say, if things are going to change, I must change. And that's where everything begins. My purpose today is to show you what separates these two groups, not in talent, not in luck, but in philosophy. The average person doesn't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they follow an average pattern. And the exceptional person doesn't rise because of magic. They rise because they follow an exceptional pattern. My hope is that by the time we're done, you'll see clearly what those patterns look like, and more importantly, how you can step away from the many and quietly join the few. Because it only takes one decision, one shift in thinking, one moment of honesty with yourself to start writing a whole new chapter. And today, we're going to talk about exactly where that shift begins. Now, once we understand that life sorts itself into the many and the few, the next natural question is, why do most people stay among the many? And let me give you the truth as plainly as I can. Most people don't stay average because they're weak or lazy or broken. No. They stay average because they follow patterns they never stop to question. Patterns they inherited, patterns they repeat, patterns that feel comfortable, familiar, automatic. And comfort is a powerful trap because it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like safety. Most people choose comfort over challenge, even though challenge is the doorway to growth. They choose excuses over responsibility, even though responsibility is the doorway to power. They choose hope without strategy, even though strategy is the doorway to progress. So the many fall into a quiet drift, a slow, gentle slide into the average life, not because they can't rise, but because they never pause long enough to examine the direction they're drifting. And here's something I learned early. The average person doesn't fail overnight. No, failure is subtle. It's a few missed disciplines, a few excuses rehearsed, a few days waiting for a better moment, repeated year after year, until one day they wake up and wonder where the time went. The problem is not that people don't know what to do. Most people do know. The problem is they never developed a philosophy strong enough to turn knowing into doing. That's what keeps people average, not ability. Not intelligence, just a weak philosophy about effort, responsibility, and the price of progress. But the good news is, philosophy can be changed. And when it changes, everything else begins to change with it. So let's take the next step and talk about what the exceptional do differently, because the few don't operate by chance, they operate by mindset. Now let's talk about the few, because if you study them long enough, you'll notice something remarkable. Before their habits changed, before their results changed, their thinking changed. See, the exceptional don't wait for life to hand them growth. No, they treat growth as a responsibility. They believe that if their life is going to improve, they must improve. If their circumstances are going to rise, they must rise. And this shift from external control to internal responsibility is the birthplace of all transformation. The many look at conditions and say, I hope things get better. The few look at themselves and say, I must get better. And that difference in language creates a difference in future. The few think in terms of cause and effect. If I plant, I'll harvest. If I read, I'll learn. If I practice, I'll improve. They don't see effort as punishment. They see effort as investment. They understand that every book read, every hour practiced, every disciplined choice is a seed planted for a future harvest. And here's another key. The few are possibility thinkers. They don't measure themselves by what they've done. They measure themselves by what they can become. The many look backward to explain their limits. The few look forward to define their potential. And because they believe growth is possible, they act differently. They try again after setbacks. They adjust their plan instead of abandoning their path. They treat failure as data, not identity. And slowly, This mindset, this quiet, steady belief that improvement is within their control becomes the engine of their behavior. So remember this, before the exceptional have different habits, they have a different philosophy. Because when your thinking rises, your actions rise. And when your actions rise, your results rise. The climb begins in the mind long before it becomes visible in life. Now, once the mindset shifts, the next natural step is habits, because the few don't just think differently, they do things daily that the many won't. Now, once the mindset has shifted, once a person truly believes growth is their responsibility, something wonderful begins to happen. The disciplines follow. You see, the exceptional understand a principle that most people overlook. Small disciplines practiced daily are more powerful than great efforts practiced occasionally. And if you watch the few closely, you'll notice their lives are built on a handful of simple, consistent actions. They read every day, not a book a week, just a few pages a day. Why? Because they know that reading turns years of someone else's experience into minutes of personal gain. They journal. Again, not pages of poetry, just a few lines of reflection. Because writing helps them think, and thinking helps them improve. They plan their day before the day begins. They choose their priorities instead of letting the world choose for them. They train their body because they understand that discipline in one area spills over into every other. And most importantly, they follow through whether they feel like it or not. The many wait for the right mood. The few honor the decision they already made. And here's something I've said for years. It's not what you do once in a while that shapes your destiny. It's what you do every day. A few small disciplines practiced every day can take you anywhere you want to go. But a few small errors in judgment practiced every day can take you somewhere you never wanted to go. That's the law. And it applies to all of us. So the question is never, will disciplines work? The question is, will you work the disciplines? Because the disciplines are simple. The difficulty is that most people underestimate their power. The many dismiss what seems too small to matter. The few repeat what seems too small to fail. And that's why their results begin to separate, month after month, year after year. But disciplines don't exist in a vacuum. There's another factor that shapes your future even more than habits, and the few understand it well. Let's talk about associations, because the people you allow into your life can raise your ceiling or define your floor. Now let's move to one of the great turning points in anyone's life: association. And let me tell you, this is one of the most profound discoveries you'll ever make about human behavior. You don't have to go very far to predict a person's future. All you need to know is who they spend their time with, because whether you're aware of it or not, the people around you are shaping you every single day, slowly, quietly, consistently. Their vocabulary becomes your vocabulary. Their standards become your standards. Their level of ambition becomes the ceiling you stop at, or the floor you rise from. I've been saying this for years. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And the few understand this. They choose their associations intentionally. They limit their exposure to complainers because complaining is contagious. They avoid the company of excuse makers because excuses spread like a virus. And they stay far from the crowd that laughs at discipline because that crowd never goes anywhere worth going. Instead, the few seek out 3 kinds of people. First, the inspired, those ahead of them, whose example raises their vision. Second, the disciplined, their peers, who challenge them to stay sharp. And third, the growing, those who remind them of where they began and keep them grounded in gratitude. The many surround themselves with the familiar. The few surround themselves with the exceptional. And here's the key. You don't have to fire your friends. You just have to adjust the influence. Take some voices from the front row and move them to the balcony. Bring others from books, mentors, thinkers to the front row. Because if you don't design your environment will design you. And the environment of the average is built on comfort, complaints, and the belief that this is just the way life is. The environment of the exceptional is built on goals, standards, and the belief that this is just the beginning. And once your associations rise, something else rises with them, your sense of value. And that leads us to the next distinction between the many and the few: how they use their time, their money, and their attention. Now let's move to another major distinction between the many and the few: how they use their resources. And resources, remember, aren't just money. They include time, attention, energy, and opportunity. And here's something most people never fully understand. Your life expands or contracts based on how you invest what you've been given. The many spend their time, the few invest it. The many spend their money, the few allocate it toward their future. The many give their attention to whatever shows up, the few direct their attention to what matters most. And when people ask me, Mr. Rohn, what separates those who rise from those who repeat? I tell them it's not the amount of resources, it's the philosophy behind them. Let's start with time. Poor thinkers kill time. Exceptional thinkers cultivate it. The few understand that an hour invested in learning can save you years of trial and error. 10 minutes of planning can turn a chaotic day into a productive one. A moment of reflection can keep you from repeating yesterday's mistakes. Then there's money. The many use money to escape. The few use money to empower. The many buy entertainment, the few buy education. The many look for discounts, the few look for returns. And remember this, you can't afford to be cheap with the things that build your future. Books, courses, experiences, mentors, these aren't expenses. These are the tools that turn ordinary people into extraordinary ones. And finally, attention. Attention is the currency of your focus, and focus is the engine of your future. The many scatter it. The few protect it like treasure. They don't let every notification, every distraction, every opinion pull them off course. They ask one simple question before they commit their time, money, or energy. Does this move me closer to the person I want to become? And if the answer is no, they let it go. No guilt, no debate. That's the economy of the exceptional. And once you adopt it, life begins to shift. Because every resource you use becomes a vote for your future self. But all this leads to a critical moment, the moment where an average life becomes an exceptional one. And it's the moment of decision. Now we come to one of the greatest turning points in a person's life. The decision. Not the wish, not the hope, not the intention, the decision. And I've learned something over the years. People don't change when they get more information. People change when they draw a line. A line that says, no more drifting, no more excuses, no more almost. In every story of transformation, every success, every breakthrough, there is always a moment when someone looks in the mirror and says, enough. I will not live this year the same way I lived the last one. And let me tell you, that moment is powerful. The many try, the few decide. The many say, I'll start when I'm ready. The few say, I'll start so I can get ready. The many negotiate with their weakness. The few negotiate with their purpose. And here's the difference. A preference says, I'd like to be better. A priority says, I must become better. Preference is what fills journals in January. Priority is what fills calendars in March. The many wake up every morning and remake the same tired decision, asking themselves, do I feel like it today? The few make the decision once and then they spend their days honoring it. It is a profound shift. Once you declare, this is who I am now, discipline becomes easier because it's no longer a debate. And that's the secret most people never learn. Your life doesn't change because you try harder. Your life changes because you become someone who no longer negotiates with the old version of yourself. That's the decision that divides the few from the many. And once that decision is made, the next step is to build the structure, the pathway, the daily rhythm that keeps you moving forward long after the feeling fades. And that leads us to something incredibly practical. How to join the few quietly in the next 90 days. Now that we've talked about the decision, let's turn it into something practical, because philosophy becomes powerful only when it becomes practice. And if you want to move from the many to the few, you don't need a revolution. You need a 90-day redesign. Just 90 days. Long enough to transform your patterns, short enough to start today. The first 30 days are what I call foundation. This is where you build the basic rhythm. Read 10 pages a day, just 10. That's the doorway to new ideas. Write one line in your journal, just one. That's the beginning of self-awareness. Track 3, simple habits. Not 50, just 3. What gets measured gets improved. And finally, reduce one negative association. Not eliminate everyone you know. Just create distance from one person who drains your energy or feeds your excuses. Those are your foundations. Then, in the next 30 days, we move to construction. Add a morning planning ritual. Spend 5 minutes choosing your priorities instead of letting the world choose for you. Start a weekly review system. Ask yourself what worked, what didn't, and what needs changing. Replace passive hours with productive hours. Swap scrolling for study, entertainment for development. And start one small disciplined routine, 20 minutes of movement or skill practice or deep work. Something that says, I'm building momentum. Then we enter the final 30 days elevation. This is where you break the invisible ceiling. Remove one major distraction, the one that has been stealing your time, your focus, your potential. Create a personal philosophy statement, who you intend to become and how you intend to live. Expand your circle with one growth-minded association, someone whose presence raises your standards. And build a monthly goal and measurement system so every 30 days becomes a new opportunity for refinement instead of repetition. These 90 days won't turn you into someone else. They will simply reveal the person you were capable of being all along, quietly, steadily, predictably. And once you've lived this pattern for 90 days, something irreversible happens. You stop identifying with the many and you begin identifying with the few. That's the beginning of a new life. But to reinforce everything we've learned, we need one final step, the closing philosophy that turns temporary effort into a permanent way of being. Now, as we bring our time together to a close, let me leave you with one final thought. Your life changes the moment you decide that it must. Not because someone motivates you, not because circumstances force you, but because deep within yourself you make a quiet, firm declaration, from this point forward, I rise. You see? The difference between the many and the few isn't destiny. It isn't luck. It isn't talent. It's choice made once and honored daily. The many wait for the world to change. The few change themselves. The many repeat the same year again and again. The few learn, adjust, refine. And when you start living like the few, when you start reading a little, reflecting a little, disciplining yourself a little, your entire life begins to shift. Not overnight, but inevitably. Because remember, for things to change, you have to change. For things to get better, you have to get better. And the moment you take responsibility for that truth, you reclaim the steering wheel of your life. You stop blaming the economy. You stop blaming circumstances. You stop blaming others. And instead, you begin building choice by choice, day by day, the life you were always capable of living. So let the many do what the many do. Let them wait. Let them wish. Let them talk. And you begin the journey of the few. Build your philosophy. Guard your associations. Protect your time. Strengthen your disciplines. And watch your life rise to meet the standard you set for it. Because the greatest reward of all is not the money you earn or the trophies you gather. The greatest reward is the person you become by honoring your potential. So take that step, draw that line, make that decision. And remember, the crowd will settle, but you were never meant to settle. You were meant to grow. You were meant to build. You were meant to become exceptional. Now go prove it one disciplined day at a time.